there's this enormous desire by anybody of goodwill for there to be peace everywhere in the world, and there should be peace in the Middle East, and there should be peace between Israel and the Palestinians. And the question is, why is there no peace? And I want to suggest some answers, what I think Americans should know about the Israeli-Palestinian issue, and why there is no peace in a two-state solution. Why? These are the questions you should be able to answer. What is the international basis for Israel's legitimacy? When was the first two-state solution? When did Israel gain control of the West Bank? When was the PLO created? And what do the initials PLO stand for? And what is the significance of Khartoum? Everybody in this room has to know what Khartoum is. I want to begin by asking you, do people in this room know what is the international basis for Israel's legitimacy? If you think you know, please raise your hand for me. What makes Israel legitimate according to international law?
The UN voting Israel to be a member of the world community.
What year?
1948. 47, 48.
Well, which is it?
47.
Okay. How many think it's the United Nations 1947? Does anybody think there's a different answer? What's the different answer? 40. Well, the UN decision was in 47.
Yeah, right.
November 29th, 1947. Anybody else?
The Balfour Declaration.
The Balfour Declaration, early part of the 20th century. But so far, both of you are wrong. The Balfour Declaration had no international standing at all. It was simply a letter from the Foreign Ministry of Great Britain to Chayim that said, we want to create in the land of Palestine a Jewish homeland. It had no international standing at all. And while almost everyone I ask this question of answers the UN resolution of 1947, that is not the international legitimacy for Israel. After World War I, the world got together and created this international body for the first time. It becomes the United Nations after World War II. And the League of Nations says there's something called the Ottoman Empire that ruled the entire Middle East. They fought on the side of Germany. They lost. The League of Nations came together. It was basically Great Britain and France. And they decided they would carve up the Ottoman Empire into new Arab states. By the way, normally Jews don't know that. The League of Nations' goal was to create for the Arab world states of their own. Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, all of this is created out of the League of Nations. And after creating all these Arab states, the League of Nations said, and by the way, we will also create one small Jewish state, surrounded by all of the Arab world that we're creating in Arab. But that became the international justification, rationale, and legitimacy for the state of Israel. If anybody says to you, what's the legal basis of Israel? The legal basis is the League of Nations, which, as you said, created a mandate system, but the mandate was only a way of administering all these different states. So the United Nations said, until the Arabs of Syria can govern themselves, France will have a mandate. You'll administer it, and when Syria is ready, you'll give it over to Syria. And Great Britain, you'll have Palestine. And when the Jews are ready, you'll hand it over to Palestine. All the United Nations did was ratify the decisions of the League of Nations. It did not create anything. By the way, was it important?
Yes.
Absolutely. Because you understand how world opinion has a power of its own. And the question was, after World War II, what was the sentiment of the world? And the United Nations reflected a sentiment. Had the United Nations said no, it would have been very hard. Would not have meant Israel would not be. But it would not have had the international community's support, which it had after November 29th, 1947. By the way, if I asked that question differently, if I said to you, what is the Jewish basis for Israel's legitimacy? What would you tell me? The Bible. And but when you say the Bible, what do you mean the Bible? Why the Bible? What's the Bible got to do with this?
Well, written.
What's written?
The land of milk and honey. Go back to the land, our land.
That's after the Exodus. They were heading for a land of their own.
Okay. Basically, this is the answer is correct. What you have in the Torah and then the Nach, especially the prophets, in the prophetic section of the Jewish Bible, you have all the history of the Jewish people coming back to the land of Canaan. By the way, do you remember which book of the Bible the children of Israel returned to the land of Canaan? Which book is that in? No. Exodus is the Mount Sinai story. Only Mount Sinai. That's the only thing that happens. We're at Mount Sinai. At the end of roughly a year, a little more than a year, we are ready to move on. We're going to go on to the Promised Land. Which book of the Torah describes our wandering toward the Promised Land?
Vayikra.
No. Vayikra is the book of Leviticus. Vayikra is all the Levitical laws. There's no narrative in Leviticus at all. In which book of the Torah do we head from Sinai to the land of Canaan? Deuteronomy is wrong. Don't feel bad. There's only one more. Say it again. The book of Numbers, Bamidbar. Bamidbar, by the way, means in the wilderness. In the fourth book of the Torah, we travel from Sinai to the land of Canaan. By the way, how long does it take us to get there? You know it's 40 years. Well, it was 37. But 40 years. Have you ever asked yourself, come on, that's a week and a half work a walk. We can do it in a week and a half. Why 40 years? And if you remember, they get to the land of Canaan right away. They send in 12 spies. 10 spies come back and say, the land is full of giants. We can't take it. Only 2 of the 12 spies say, the land is flowing with milk and honey, and God will protect us. Let us go. Return to our land. The land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, where our forefathers came from. Let's go back. Only 2. Do you remember them 2? Joshua and Caleb. Who said it? Mitsuyan. By the way, that's the book of Numbers. God says in the book of Numbers, the people aren't ready. They have a slave mentality. They must wander in the wilderness until a new generation that never knew slavery grows up and becomes adult. And that's the generation that will enter the land of Canaan. How many adults who left Egypt lived to enter the land of Canaan? 1. Who? Who? Joshua. You're half right. It's not 1, it's who? Aaron died in the wilderness. Who else? The other guy. Who's the other guy? Who's the other guy? Caleb. So the only 2 Israelites who as adults left Egypt, lived to enter the land of Canaan, were Joshua and Caleb. What about Moses? It's an amazing story. It's an amazing lesson. It's amazing how the Jewish tradition is so wise. It's not about whether you make it. It's what the journey is all about. Moses dies in the plains of Moab. Which book? Which book? Number 5. What's it called? Numbers is 4. Deuteronomy is correct. Devarim. So Moses dies, and where does he die? in the book? I don't mean the place. Where in the book does he die? Where? Beginning of the book, middle of the book.
The beginning of the book.
Beginning of the book. No.
We're doing very well.
You are, by the way. He dies at the end. The last thing that happens in the Torah is that Moses dies. Now I'll ask the question again. In which book of the Bible do the children of Israel re-enter the promised land, the land of Eretz Yisrael, the land flowing with milk and honey, the promised land, the land of our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? In which book? Numbers live in the wilderness. Deuteronomy live in the plains of Moab. But Midbar is in the wilderness. They're in the wilderness. By the way, it's interesting, and it's only because it's never pointed out. They never enter the land of Canaan in the Torah. At the end of the Torah, they're on the wrong side of the Jordan River. And you know what we do on Simchat Torah? What do we do on Simchat Torah? What? We roll the Torah back to Bereshit. We start all over again. We haven't made the land of Canaan. There's a powerful lesson there. First of all, we're always learning. Jews always learn. The minute you get to the end, you roll back and start all over again. And every time we read the Torah, it's a new book. Why? Because we're new. And we bring a different self to the text. And things we hadn't thought of and seen and understood, we now see and understand. But what's interesting is we never make the land of Canaan in the Torah. It's the next book. Do you know the name of the next book, which is the first book of the prophets? I will tell you, Joshua. Joshua leads us across the Jordan River and defeats the city of Jericho, divides the land among the 12 tribes. And from there on, our history in Eretz Yisrael is recorded and is real. And we have kings. Does anybody remember who the first king of Israel is? Saul is right, tall Saul. Does anybody remember the second king? King David, the greatest king of all. And the third king, Solomon, his favorite son. And under King Solomon, the Jewish empire is at its largest, extending way up into what is now Syria, way over into what is now Jordan. And it is under the Solomonic kingdom that sovereignty, Jewish sovereignty of the land, is at its height. And if somebody says to you, where do we get this from? We had sovereignty in the land of Canaan from the time of King David and King Solomon until the Roman Empire threw us out in the year 70. There was a David, there was a Solomonic kingdom, there was a divided kingdom after Solomon dies, Israel in the north and Judah in the south, and in the end, Assyria destroys Israel and Babylonia. In 586 BCE, destroys the first temple and exiles all of the wealthy and intelligentsia back to Babylon. And from then on, the Jewish diaspora has been in many ways determinative of Jewish life. What's the point? The point is when somebody says, what's the Jewish claim on the land of Canaan? The land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael. It is the sovereignty that we exercised from roughly the year 900 BCE to 70 CE, when the Roman Empire destroyed the second temple and exiled us. And one of the things the Jews have said, Passover after Passover, is, at the end of the Seder, the phrase is, next year in Jerusalem. And that has been a driving dream, by the way. Like everything else in life, it is poetic. There are millions of Jews who have prayed next year in Jerusalem before there was a state of Israel. Now there is a state. No one's heading there. We're still in Levittown, and New York, and Miami, and Chicago, and Brooklyn, and in Connecticut, where we live. But there is now a place where any Jew who wants to can go home. And that's the basis which drives the Jewish claim. The claim on international legitimacy is the League of Nations. When was the first two-state solution proposed? Oh, this is such an interesting question. You know what the two-state solution is. That Jew and Arab should live side by side inside Eretz Yisrael. Inside. And for a long time in our day, this became a driving issue that separated liberal Jews from non-liberal Jews. I'm asking you, when was the idea of the two-state solution first proposed? Does anybody know? 1938. 1938. David is correct. What happened is the following. Great Britain had a mandate to administer Palestine, to make it a Jewish homeland. And what you see here is, this is the Middle East. These are the Arab states that were created by the League of Nations. And here is the mandate from Palestine. By the way, you will notice this is the what river? Jordan River. And please notice that when the League of Nations established a mandate, it created on both sides of the Jordan River. Notice the word Jordan never appears. When the League of Nations created Palestine, that's what it assumed it would be. However, in 1922, Great Britain gave what it called Transjordan, trans meaning across the Jordan, to the Hashemite kingdom. And so after 1922, this becomes Jewish Palestine, and it looks very much like we are used to seeing. There are no borders. The only border is the Jordan River, and that became what the League of Nations expected after Great Britain lopped off Transjordan. And when Great Britain did this, the Jewish community had to make a decision. Did it live with this, or did it fight it? And inside the Jewish community, there was division, a machloket. There was an argument, led principally by, ultimately, as it goes through history, the revisionist party led by Jabotinsky. And Ben-Gurion represented the Yishuv and the Jewish agency and the formal Jewish community. And Jabotinsky said, we were given both sides of the Jordan. We will not rest until we have both sides of the Jordan. And Ben-Gurion and the Jewish agency said, this is the essence of the Jewish homeland. We need it, we take it, we accept it. So from 1922 on, this is what is considered to be Jewish Palestine. And from the 1920s on, really even before that, the Muslim Arab community, led by the Grand Mufti, said we can't have Jews here. And there was literal fighting, killing, death. And then in 1929, there was a great massacre at Hebron. And Great Britain finally said to the world, this is a mess. The only way we can ever make this work is if the Jew and the Arab share the land of Palestine. If they share it. When was the first state solution proposed? The answer is the 1938 British Peel Commission, where they proposed a partition plan, and the partition plan had a very simple concept. The concept is Jews and Arabs will share the land. That's what a two-state solution means. Two-state solution simply means two groups will share the land. The Peel Commission comes out in 1938. The Jewish community is stunned. After all, they thought they already gave up this. This is now ours. This is now Arab. There are people to this day who argue this is the Palestinian state. And the Jewish community says, wait a minute, you gave us, we're left with this, at least give us this. Peel Commission said it won't work. Even inside, on the west side of the Jordan River, you need to share the land. What was the Jewish response to the 1938 plan to share the land? What did Ben-Gurion and the Jewish Agency ultimately say? We will share. Okay. By the way, we think it's all ours. We believe it's all ours. History says it's all ours. But we'll share. What was the Arab response? 1938 partition plan. Over my dead body. Now this becomes the essential problem, the existential human problem that has driven the Israeli, now called Palestinian conflict. By the way, there are those of you in this room old enough to remember it was not called Israeli-Palestinian. It used to be the Arab-Israeli conflict. In a stroke of PR genius, the Palestinians renamed it the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Because as long as people heard Arab-Israeli, they imagined the entire Arab world against this little teeny tiny Israel. The minute you say Israeli-Palestinian, especially after the Six-Day War, it sounds like this powerful Israel against this little teeny tiny people called Palestinians. Anyway, the problem was the Jews said, okay, we'll share, and the Arabs said, we will never share. When did Israel gain control of the West Bank? This should be the easiest question of all. 1967, the Six-Day War. Exactly right. The Six-Day War of June 1967. I hope you know most of the history of the Six-Day War when Abdel Nasser was in charge of was basically trying to create a confederation under the Arab League, and he was threatening to destroy Israel. The rhetoric was, we're going to push all the Jews into the sea. He amassed the Syrian army on Israel's north, the Egyptian army on Israel's south. The king of Jordan was ambivalent, but he also brought his forces along the Jordan River. And Israel on June 5th decided it would launch a preemptive strike against an imminent attack. And we know that in 6 days in one day it had decimated the Egyptian Air Force. Nasser sucked Jordan into the war, and ultimately the state of Israel won the Golan Heights from Syria, the Sinai from Egypt, and it pushed across into what's now called the West Bank to take land from Jordan, all in June of 1967. We got the West Bank. By the way, the old city of Jerusalem was and is on the West Bank. Have any of you ever been to the Western Wall? Okay. Have any of you ever been to the West Bank? By the way, you understand how many hands went up when I said, have you been to the Western Wall? Every hand that went up for yes, I've been to the Western Wall should also say, yes, I've been to the West Bank. We don't think of it as the West Bank. It's West Bank. It was part of Jordan prior to 1967, under Jordan's control before 1967. We got the Golan Heights, we got the Sinai Peninsula, and we got Gaza, all in 67. These are the three maps that you should be familiar with. This is the UN partition plan. And notice what you see as yellow is going to be the Arab state. What you see as orange was going to be the Jewish state. This meant, by the way, the United Nations partition plan, and all they were doing was ratifying what first the League of Nations had done, and they were following the Peel Commission, is they were creating this very narrow strip of land along the coast. And most people look at that and say, that you can't, that's not a state. You can't defend it. Oh, thanks, you gave us all this desert in the south. And notice Jerusalem is an international city in the center. This was the partition plan of 47. After the War of Independence, that's what Israel looked like. It moved from this, the United Nations plan, to this. Now, how were the borders of what becomes the modern state of Israel, as opposed to the partition plan, how did these borders come to be? Who established this as the international border of Israel? Who did? Who did? It's an accident. This is a ceasefire line that was created when the United States imposed a ceasefire on the Jewish state of Israel and on the Arabs trying to destroy Israel in 1949. In 1949, from May 14th and 15th of 1948, you know there was the War of Independence. And in the War of Independence, when Ben-Gurion announced the state of Israel on May 14th, 1948, this is what he meant. The Arab world said, "Over my dead body." And they attacked. Israel fought back, and what was happening was the Israelis were trying to move as far into the Jordan River, Jordan Valley as they could, while the Arab world was trying to totally annihilate the Jewish state. And what happened was the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, was able to push from here to here. And both parties were told the date there would be an armistice. They fought like heck. The Jews tried to push as far towards the Jordan River as they could, and the Arab armies tried to push towards the Mediterranean Sea as far as they could. And little Jerusalem was caught in between the armies. The day of the armistice that went into effect, Israel did not have control of the old city of Jerusalem. And that's why it became part of Jordan. This is simply where the armies were at the armistice day in 1949. They are not created by the United Nations. Most people think this is what the United Nations meant. No, this is what the United Nations meant. And it has no international sanction. In addition, there is nothing more or less Jewish or Palestinian about this land or this land. If the Palestinians had said, we'll take this, we'll accept the UN partition plan, this would have been Palestinian land. They said, we do not accept the partition plan. Therefore, none of this is recognized by the Arab-Palestinian world. None of it. This is not Palestinian land, as far as the Palestinians are concerned. This is Palestinian land, as far as the Palestinians are concerned. And the Jews said, this is all Eretz Yisrael, but you know what, we'll share it. But somebody has to share it with me. But understand, if you ever hear somebody say, why is Israel building on Palestinian land on the West Bank? That is an intellectual falsehood. What can be said is that ever since 1967, this becomes disputed territory, and that's the third map over there. In the Six-Day War, Israel takes this territory, which had been Jordan after 49, and they take the Golan Heights, Gaza Strip, and Sinai. And this becomes an Israel that looks far more like the Solomonic kingdom and has nothing to do anymore with the UN partition plan. And these are the three maps you should have in your mind. UN plan, armistice line, which becomes what people call the modern state of Israel. And then you have 67. Israel gains control of the West Bank in 1967. When was the PLO created? If you ask most Jews, they will say 67, because they assume that the PLO was created after Israel comes in control of the West Bank. It was 1964. Ruth, you were right. 3 years before the Six-Day War. And what do the letters PLO stand for?
Palestinian Liberation Organization.
Palestinian Liberation Organization. How many agree? You're all wrong. And the mistake you're making isn't minor. It is enormous. It is the,
Palestine Liberation.
say it again.
Palestine Liberation Organization.
It is not a people's movement. The PLO was not created to liberate a people, the Palestinian people. It was created to liberate
Palestine.
a place, a territory called Palestine. It was created to liberate Palestine. Now the question becomes, if it was 1964, it's when this existed. This is 67. This is 64. What exactly did it mean when it was going to liberate Palestine? What land? You understand, by the way, if you read the Palestinian Charter, the Palestine Liberation Organization Charter, does it mention the West Bank? Does it want to liberate the West Bank? Does it mention the West Bank? You are wrong. The Palestine Liberation Organization Charter mentions the West Bank and says, we want to liberate all of Palestine except for the West Bank and Gaza. The PLO was created specifically only to liberate Israel. Jordan was in control of the West Bank. The PLO said, we have no designs on the West Bank. Gaza was in charge of Egypt. We have no designs on Gaza. Most American Jews believe the PLO was created after the Six-Day War because the Arabs felt they should get this land, and this land, and this land back, and this land back. No. It was not the Palestinian liberation. It was not a people's freedom movement. It was an attempt to ultimately inherit what had been said to the Jews since the 1920s and since the Peel Commission of 1938. You can't have any of it. We want to liberate Tel Aviv and Jaffa and Haifa and Caesarea and Ashkelon. That's what the PLO wanted to liberate, and they do to this day. That is an existential problem, for not even for a Jew. You grow up as a liberal American who believes that there's a dignity and a sanctity to, first of all, the nation states of the United Nations, and also to people. And then there's a group that says, wait a minute, well, that's not sharing. You can't be. It's an existential you can't be. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment, because we also often misunderstand what drives the Muslim-Palestinian fervor and passion. Very often you will hear people vilify the Palestinians who don't want to make peace with Israel. We make a mistake. It's not that they're bad people. But wait, if you meet most Israelis who know Palestinians will tell you they have lovely Palestinian friends. They're lovely people. Their leadership is dedicated to a Muslim theology that says no land conquered by the Muslim Empire can ever be ruled again by an infidel, especially a Jew. Now, that's in their soul. It's not because they sit down and say, you know what, we're going to give the Jews grief. But I'm sure there are anti-Semitic Palestinians and Arabs too. But that's not what drives this. What drives this is a fundamentally different view of the world and of history and what should be. The Palestinian doesn't make peace with the Jew because he can't, not because he won't. And it's very hard for Jews to understand, especially Western American Jews. We're so used to an American mentality of compromise and working it out. We're not used to a culture which sees the world different. And yet everybody knows if they're ever in an Arab bazaar, the way in which you negotiate is very different than you negotiate at Macy's. And what's interesting, if not, as it's sad, is that in classical Arabic, there's no word for compromise. Not because they're bad. They have a different worldview. There is no word for compromise in the classical Arabic language. We'll do that more in a minute. Anyway, so what's the significance of Khartoum? How many of you know what Khartoum is? There are people in American positions of Jewish leadership. Jewish leaders don't know what Khartoum is. But you will know. And it is enormously instructive. After the Six-Day War, there was a question of what Israel should do with all the territory it now controlled. One thing it could do is keep it, annex it, make it into the greater Israel. The overwhelming sentiment in the Jewish state was that would be a mistake. And Israel, I don't know how many remember the euphoria we all felt in 1967, and how suddenly the image of the Jew went from an old Jew with a kaftan and he was carrying a Talmud in his hands and he was stooped over to an Israeli soldier with an Uzi over the back and bullets over there. And I'm talking about a woman. There's a great picture that was published in Israel Today. She's on the cover of the book, and she's a Sabra Israeli, and she's got the most lovely smile, and you know she doesn't want to hurt anybody. But in no circumstance will she let her family be hurt. And all of a sudden, the Jew had a different image. In the Soviet Union, Jewish came alive after the 67 war. Jewish identity changed in America after the 67 war. And so the Jew felt, surely the Arab world knows now they can't defeat us. Why not make peace? So Levi Eshkol was the prime minister. And Levi Eshkol said to the Arab League after the 67 war, you can have it virtually all back. We'll give it all back. We only want one thing in return. We want you to work on the borders with us, because they were arbitrary and accidental. And we want you to stop fighting us. We want you to recognize that we have a right to be too. We recognize you have a right to be. We're ready to do it too. But you have to recognize we have a right to be, just to be, and live with us, like Canada and the United States, side by side. How about it? Levi Eshkol said to the Arab League, you can have it virtually all back. The Arab League's response to the Israeli offer is the infamous 3 no's. This should be part of your Jewish psyche. The Arab world says to Levi Eshkol, by the way, they go to Khartoum, capital of Sudan. They go at the end of August. The war was in June. The end of August, they go. This is literally days after Israel has just won this fabulous war. And Israel says, you can have it all back. In August, the last week of August, they go to Khartoum. On September 1st, 1967, the Arab League issues its response to Levi Eshkol. The three no's. September 1, 1967. No negotiation. We will not negotiate with you. We will not recognize your right to exist. And over my dead body will there be peace. No recognition, no negotiation, no peace. Very often you will hear people say, this drives me crazy. Well, you have to understand there are two narratives. No. There's one truth. This is history. This is history. You've got one people saying over and over again, we'll share the land. Just live with us in peace. And you've got another group saying, over my dead, I can't do it. I can't do it. Oh, what about Oslo in 1993? Didn't Arafat agree to recognize the state of Israel, to take the peace out of the PLO charter calling for the destruction of Israel? And lo and behold, he and Yitzhak Rabin shake hands in front of a beaming Bill Clinton on the lawn of the White House. One more word you should know. Hudabiya. This is Hudabiya. In the 7th century, Muhammad wanted Mecca. And he amassed an army to take the city of Mecca. The Meccans found out that Muhammad was advancing with his army. They gathered their army together. It was a larger army, and they went out. They were going to fight Muhammad. Muhammad was not an idiot. Muhammad said, wait, we won't fight. Let's make a peace treaty. So they met in the city of Hudabiya. And at Hudabiya, they made a peace agreement for 9 years, 9 months, and 9 days. Muhammad promised never to attack Mecca. 9 years, 9 months, 9 days. Well, the Meccans didn't trust him. And they kept vigilant, and they kept their army up a year, 2 years. And Muhammad didn't do a thing. And so the Meccans said, you know what, the guy's serious. And they took their army to fight another battle. The minute they took the army out of Mecca, Muhammad attacked Mecca, massacred, raped, pillaged. And when he was asked, how do you break a treaty? His answer was, if Allah gives you the opportunity to destroy an enemy with whom you've made peace, you have only made a temporary peace. And anytime Allah gives you the opportunity, you are commanded to break that peace. So Yasser Arafat agrees to Oslo with Yitzhak Rabin. He then goes on a international speaking tour, trying to convince the Muslim world that they should support Oslo. He goes to Cairo. In Cairo, he speaks at the largest mosque in the city. And he is confronted. And there are those who ask him, how in the world could you ever shake the hand of the infidel Jew and make a peace agreement with him? And Arafat says, Hudabiya. He has never asked that question again. This is a mentality that the American Jew, the world Jew, the American in general has to understand. Is it nice? Is it fair? It's not about fair. It is what it is. All of you know there are 6 opportunities the Palestinians had for a Jewish state of their own. Ben-Gurion offered them a state in 1948 when the state was established. In 1967, you just saw Levi Eshkol offer the Arab League a Jewish state of their own, all the land back. In 2000, probably you know that Ehud Barak met with Yasser Arafat under Clinton's aegis, and Clinton thought he had a deal. And at the last moment, Arafat pulled out, and to this day, Clinton hates Arafat. In 2008, Ehud Olmert, the prime minister, offered Mahmoud Abbas even more land than Ehud Barak had. And Mahmoud Abbas never got back to him. And what many people don't know is that in 2014-15, there was an initiative out of our own administration in which they promised that if Palestinians would make peace with Israel, they would create a Palestinian state. This is the Obama administration. And Abbas said no to Abbas. Why is there no two-state solution? The Palestinians are simply unwilling to share the land, not because they're bad people. Muslim ideology makes it impossible for Palestinians to ever share Muslim land with an infidel state, especially a Zionist state. That's just the reality. And that's the human tragedy, by the way. The human tragedy is that there are such different mindsets that it's very hard to bridge that gap. When I was very young doing Chayim on radio, I had the good fortune to interview Hans Morgenthau, who was an international diplomat for the United States at the time. And we were talking back in the 1970s, early 80s, about the two-state solution. And he was talking to me and he said, the problem is you'd like to be able to compromise and find a compromise for every problem, but sometimes there is no compromise. And he said, I'll give you an example. What if somebody came to you and said to you, I'd like to sleep with your wife every night? And you said to them, well, that's out of the question. And they said, well, you know what? Let's compromise 3 nights a week. And the answer is still no. There's no compromise on this. And what Morgenthau was saying is there's a problem that the Arab Muslim has. And the West doesn't get it. Because if the West got it, it might handle it very differently. The strategy would be different. You have a place where they are unable to compromise. But therefore, you don't say to the state of Israel, commit suicide, lie down, give up land. Unilaterally create a Palestinian state with a people whose PLO charter is not to liberate the Palestinians, but the land you call Israel. And when you heard the two-state solution discussed most recently with Abbas, the most he could say is 2 states for 2 peoples, never could mention the word Jew. I want to show you what I hope all of you do also know about Israel. It's the tone of Israel. It's the texture of Israel. It's the value system that drives Israel. Do you know who Salim Jourban is? Who is Salim? You should all know. Does he look like a nice guy? He's a nice guy. This is very interesting. Salim Jourban is an Arab-Israeli citizen. There are some Jews who do not know that Arab Israelis are full citizens in the state of Israel. He's an Arab Israeli. He has a law degree from Hebrew University. Did pretty well for himself. And he became a member of the Israeli Supreme Court in 2004. You understand, there is an Arab Israeli. He's the second, by the way. There are Arab Israelis who have served as Supreme Court justices. It's a different mentality than most American Jews imagine, especially if they want Israel to be open and tough. He's a Supreme Court justice. By the way, he was the presiding judge at the trial that convicted Israeli President Moshe Katsav. He was the presiding judge. Nobody made an issue. What do you mean? He's an Arab Israeli? No, he's an Arab Israeli citizen who happens to be Arab. He's a member of the Supreme Court. And he was the one who headed the 2015 Elections Commission. That's the state of Israel. By the way, he refuses to sing the Israeli national anthem, Hatikva, because it has the phrase Nefesh Yehudi, and the state of Israel leaves him alone. The state of Israel permits a Supreme Court justice not to sing Hatikva because they're sensitive to the fact that this is his mentality. Leave him alone. Meanwhile, he'll serve as the Supreme Court justice over the trial of an Israeli president and over the recent elections. Jamal Abu Mushin. You don't have to remember him, but I just want you to know. This is a guy who murdered Israelis in 1991. He was sentenced to 23 years in Israeli prison for the murders. And while in prison, he studied for free at Hebrew University. And when he gets out of jail, he leaves with a bachelor's degree in political science. That's Israel. That's Israel. Abu Luay. You don't have to remember him either. Mahmoud Abbas's brother. He came to Israel and was accepted and treated in the Asulta Hospital in Tel Aviv for cancer in 2016. The fact that he was Abbas's brother meant nothing to the state of Israel. There's a human being in need, we treat him. By the way, it was not only Abbas's brother, Abbas's brother-in-law was treated in 2015. And it wasn't just his brother and his brother-in-law, it was his mother in 2014. The state of Israel cared for Abbas's mother, who was ill with cancer, while Abbas and others in the Fatah, while Abbas is celebrating when Palestinians blow up Israeli kids. And the mother is still treated. Ismail Haniyeh. He is the Hamas terrorist leader in Gaza. His daughter was treated in an Israeli hospital in 2014. It didn't matter to Israel. Musa Abu Marzouk. He is another Hamas leader. His 60-year-old sister was treated in an Israeli hospital in 2014. Look, there are a million things I could show you of how unique the Israeli mindset is and what its embrace of even what we call the enemy is. If you talk to most Israelis, and if you watch JBS, you'll hear me ask this question time and time again. I'll have an Israeli on. We just did an interview, I don't know if you saw it, with Miriam Peretz, a mother who lost 2 sons in different years fighting for the IDF. In Israel, by the way, if you lose 1 child in the IDF, all your other children are exempt from military service. Her sons said, we're not going to stop fighting for Israel. Please, please, Ima. Please, Ima. Please, Abba. Because they had to sign a waiver. Please, don't keep us from serving in the IDF. Her son says this lying in her lap while she's still grieving over her firstborn son. And she said to me, what could we say? We had to say yes. And then he is killed. She's lost 2 sons. And I say to her, so do you hate Palestinians? She looks at me as if I'm crazy. They all look at me as if I'm crazy. We don't hate anybody. We wish the fighting would stop. We don't hate anybody. Are there some people in Israel who hate? I'm sure there are. Is it the dominant feeling in Israel? Not at all. I interviewed her son as well, the brother, the 3rd brother. Do you hate Palestinians? I hate the people who killed my brothers. I don't hate Palestinians. So what's a prerequisite for peace between Israel and the Palestinians? Here it is. The line is, Adonai owes le'amo yitain. Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Adonai will give strength unto his people. Adonai will bless his people with peace. This is not my understanding. This is Alan Dershowitz. Dershowitz says over and over again, the Jewish insight is, when do you have peace? When you have strength. What is necessary for Israel today? Israel must be as strong and resolute as it can possibly be. And in that case, maybe we can get a hudabiyah. And what sophisticated Israelis say to me is, we'll take a hudabiyah. Maybe we'll have a hudabiyah for 100 years. A temporary peace. Because as long as we're strong, they'll honor that peace. So we must remain strong. The United States must keep Israel strong. The American Jewish community must put pressure on the American administration to always keep Israel strong. And out of that strength, we can pray, and we always will. We can pray for peace. It's been an honor to be with you.
Very good.
Thank you for your kindness.
Thank you.
Please watch JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.